This video is going to show you how to clear paths in the external dispatcher application. And for this video, instead of using Run8, I'm going to use the simulator so we can set up different scenarios that we can test with. So first of all, I'm going to create a train. Just right click on a block in the simulator, any train, it doesn't matter which. So in the external dispatcher application, our train shows up. First of all, notice that when a train first shows up, I have absolutely no idea which direction it might be going. So there's no direction arrow set. So there are a few ways to actually set the direction arrow. One of the easiest is to do nothing. And when the train travels from one block to the next, then the dispatcher application will detect which direction it's going and automatically set the arrow for you. Another way is if you use the trains list, which is accessed either by this button up here or just the T key. So here there's a direction column, and if you just right click in this column, you can change the direction. So our train's westbound, so we can set a westbound arrow. Another way you can do it is to double right click on the train, and you get the option here to set either east, west, or none. And you'll notice once the direction arrow is set, our train changes color from red to pink. And the reason for that is that once I know which direction the train is going, I can do analysis to see whether the train is facing a red signal or not. And if it's facing a red signal, that means I'm assuming it needs the dispatcher's attention, so I turn it pink. Anything that's pink needs the dispatcher's attention. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So, to clear a path, it's actually very simple, and this is the alternative to clicking on individual elements, which is the old-fashioned way. So instead, to clear a path, you start a path by right-clicking on an element, and that can either be a train or a block, it doesn't matter which. And when you do, it turns white. Then you create the path by adding segments, and the way you add segments is just to pick blocks and right-click on them, and you'll see the segment of the path will show up in white. So I can just keep adding segments until I'm happy with the path. And if I make a mistake and I want to delete a segment, just right-click on the background somewhere, and that will delete the last segment. And you can keep right-clicking and keep deleting segments in that way. So when you're happy with the path, left-click on the original element, whether it was a train or a block, and that will clear all the signals and switches along that route. And you can see here, we now have our path there. So after you clear a path, if you used a train to start it, the train will be highlighted and the clear path ahead of it will be shown with yellow arrows. Just left click on the background somewhere or another train to cancel that highlighting, and you'll see green arrows show the clear path for this train, and there'll be a red arrow for the last block that's facing a red signal. So in addition to using a train as the starting point for clearing a path, I can just pick any random block anywhere, right click on it to start the path, right click to add segments. When I'm happy with the path, I left click on the original block, and that will clear that route. Another thing to note is that there are a few locations on the route where I've added these black blocks. So these don't exist within Run8, and you won't be able to see a train appear there, but these are just so that you can start or end a path at this location. So if I want to go from the inspection yard here to UP Bakersfield track there, I can right click on both of those, and hey presto, I have a path all the way. I left click there, and that lines the route out of the inspection yard correctly. So if you ever have trouble, particularly in this Barstow area, lining up all the signals and switches to go into or out of one of these yards, if you use a path, it's much simpler and it'll take care of all the signals and switches for you. So one trick that's good to know is that within the external dispatcher application, if a block that's on top of a switch is occupied and you try to throw the switch, the external dispatcher will not send a request to Run8 to throw that switch until that block is clear. So one way that you can use that is when you have a train that's in a siding and it's waiting for another oncoming train. So let's just create another train here. Just right click on a block to create a train. It doesn't matter what train it is. Let's just make this one eastbound. Create our train. So if I give this train a route through there, let's start these trains moving. So I'm gonna turn time down just a little bit here. 5 times ought to be good enough. So I'll click the start button, they'll start moving. So when this train is occupying this interlocking, it's actually safe then to route this other train out of the siding. So I use a path to route this guy out. I'll left click on this train to clear that path, but notice that this interlocking here cannot be cleared because it's still occupied. So what happens now is that the external dispatcher application every few seconds will keep checking to see whether it's clear or not yet, and when it is, then it will finally send that request through to run 8. Notice as well that this, not only can the switch not be thrown because it's occupied, but the signal won't change because there's a switch within that interlocking that's trying to change. However, one of the effects is this train is no longer pink, meaning it no longer needs the dispatcher's attention. So whenever a signal in front of a train is flashing, the external dispatcher application assumes that the dispatcher has done something to that interlocking, so he no longer needs to pay attention to that train. So as soon as that interlocking is clear, you'll notice the switch was changed, the signal changed, and that train was able to exit. So you can actually line trains out of sidings as soon as the oncoming train enters the interlocking at the end of the siding. So you don't need to actually wait until the train is all the way through and in the clear the way you do with the F3 screen within Run 8. So just another note about the train colors here. So the pink color is code for, hey, you need to do something with this train. So whenever a train is facing a red signal at the next upcoming interlocking, it will turn pink, meaning, hey, you need to give me some attention. So there are a couple of ways to change a pink train into a red or a green train. The first way, as you just saw, is to clear a path through the interlocking ahead of it. Once that starts flashing, then the train will no longer be pink. Another way is to store a path for that train, which we'll go into in a separate video. In addition to turning pink, if you really want to ignore a train, when another train exits the next interlocking, a train will flash at you, and that's to let you know, hey, you really need to give this guy some attention. So to show that in action, let's delete these trains in the simulator here. So if we add a train here, doesn't matter which train, let's add a train here again, make this eastbound. So let's set our direction arrows. So we have a pink train here because it's facing a red. They're both facing reds. Watch what happens to this train in the siding when this train exits this interlocking and goes onto the main here at Woodford. So we're running here, so I'll just clear this guy through. So first he enters the interlocking. Now when he exits, this train that's in the siding starts flashing. So when he turns pink, that means it needs attention. When it starts flashing, that means, hey, it really needs your attention. So now is probably a good time when you can use a path to line this guy out of the siding because he's flashing at you. And once you do that, he'll stop flashing and he'll stop being pink as well. And now you can ignore these two trains because this guy will just get lined out of the siding automatically as soon as that interlocking is clear. So one final note about using paths. The logic that links these paths together works pretty well, but there are a few locations where there are options. So this guy can go through this siding here. If I cancel both of those segments, it just uses one segment and it goes straight here. So what happens when I want to go up to here? Well, you notice that it first tries the straight leg through every turnout along the way, and if that doesn't work, then it'll start using the curved leg of some of the switches. And so in this case, what we really wanted was for this to go through Bena. Instead it went through Sandcut. So very simply, this is going to have to be two segments. The first one goes onto the second track at Bena, and then you can continue on from there. And that's pretty much all there is to paths. It's very simple and it saves a lot of time. You don't have to click on individual signals and switches along the way. And another thing about paths is that whenever you use a path, it will also set opposing signals to red. So you'll notice all these westbound signals are green here. If I create a path in the opposite direction, that's actually changed all the westbound signals to red and the eastbound signals to green. Very simple. That's all there is to it.